Hey, how do you feel about grilling? Pardon the mess, but my wife and I recently got a membership at Costco. So that is where we got this. Again, not sponsored by Costco. I just wanted to go through a process here. Namely, how do you, as someone in a wheelchair, still participate in cooking? In particular, I wanted to do that with a smoker because at that point it uses both what's inside and what's outside. One other quick thing on that, the the process here has very little to do with the actual cooking. I am not very good at it personally. Frankly, I've never actually smoked ribs. This is my first time doing it, but I wanted to go over essentially what the process would look like for someone who's in a wheelchair and is trying to use a grill and season meat and all that. And the reason for that is it can get a little tricky when you're using your hands with cooking and the like, and you're also using it to move. So it can be a bit tricky because your hands might get gross and you need to make sure that that grossness doesn't go to your wheels. So how do you do that? So I like to start by having my meats relatively close to my sink. Sorry that my sink is a bit of a mess right now, but basically what this does is it means that that as I'm seasoning this, I can just go directly over to the sink, wash my hands, and then at that point be ready for the next activity. Rather than needing to, for example, come from the table over here, all the way over here, and then all the way back, potentially to deal with more raw meat. One other thing I want to highlight is that the countertop here is about at shoulder level on me. It's a little bit lower, but that causes other problems of its own. I've already made a video on the problems with height and how that, in my experience, is actually the biggest problem facing most handicaps. That's the exact same case in the case of countertops and in the kitchen. Namely, if I want to cut something and it's not on a lower platform, then I'm essentially doing it at shoulder height. So it's sort of like cutting right there, right like that. Not ideal. If you do need to transfer away from the sink so that you're not able to wash your hands immediately because you're carrying something potentially toxic, for example, these beef ribs were just in plastic. I removed that plastic, but I had to get it over to the trash can, and foolishly I forgot that the trash can was on the opposite side of the room. So in that case, basically I'm going to use my phone as the example here. I'm going to take the plastic and just picture it. This is the plastic now. Boom, it's in my phone hand. I'm going to use my other hand to push off of right here so that I can propel myself over to that trash can like so. So I'm gripping it as best I can. I'm dragging it and I'm moving over here. And just like that, I haven't used the hand that's using my phone to do anything as far as moving. Now I'm here. I take the trash, I put it in the trash can. I'm now ready to go back to the meat, so now I'm going to push off over here. Maybe you don't have the back of a bookshelf. We keep this turned around, by the way, so that my son doesn't get into all the stuff that's inside of it. So let's say that you're using a wall. You can push off of the wall instead. Now you're moving backwards, so you put your hand over here, break over there, and then push. We are now facing the opposite direction. Basically just brace and stop myself over here. I am now in front of the sink once again and back over to my meat just by turning. So at this point, the beef is out, it's ready to get seasoned. I've got my seasoning over here, so just like before, I'm going to push off using one hand. In this case, I was able to sort of push off with my wrist in order to carry my phone right here and that beef. And so at this point, we are ready to season. Now, the reason I took it over to this table is because it's a little lower. If your table is the same height as your countertop, like over there, and it's at shoulder height, you could also use a chair instead because it is a shorter surface. I bring a lot of attention to this because I think that it goes quite unsaid, but also needs to be recognized how important it is. And how we are essentially built to work downwards. So when we're using a knife, we are cutting down. when we are seasoning meat, for example, or apply, like mixing something, usually we are looking down when we're doing that, because that's just how our bodies work. That doesn't change when you're sitting. So it's important to recognize essentially the layout of your kitchen as you're getting going. So I think the first of many things that I would be aware of as you're getting this process going is just plan ahead. Think of the way that your body normally works, and then try to accommodate it as best as you can. From this point, a lot of what I'm going to do now is cooking and cooking based. And so I'm going to go ahead and season my meat, and then I will sort of catch up with you from there. One quick item, you'll notice that I cut it in half. Technically that may be sacrilege. If it is, then I apologize to the beef gods. But the reason that I did that is because at this point it's easier to move. It now fits in this pan, whereas before it would hang off to the side. And again, this wouldn't really be a problem if I had both hands to use. I could use one hand to carry it, possibly even my entire arm if I really needed to. But because I'm using my hands to move, I need that to fit on my lap so that I can carry it if I want to do it that way. Because I live with my wife, I'm able to ask her for assistance. This would be tremendously harder, frankly, without her, and I am very blessed to be married to the woman that I am. I love her very much, and I'm very grateful for her. Let's say that you are not in such a position. Well, it's not impossible to get this rack of ribs out by myself, but it's a lot harder. Quite frankly, in order for me to get this out the door, what I would need to do is go out of this room, down a hall, down another room, and essentially around the building back to the grill, which isn't even set up yet at this point. So what you would need to do if you did not have help is essentially, if you were in this case like mine, you would need essentially better prep and different prep, certainly. Essentially, you would need to prepare your meat at the grill. So best case scenario, you essentially put it all in a bag, and everything you need in a bag, everything also including stuff like knives, solid blocks that you could cut on, that sort of thing, in addition to everything else you would normally need to grill. So it's a lot harder, quite honestly, but it's still doable, it's just hard. One last thing, if you do absolutely need to get somewhere else, like let's say that I went to the trash can and for whatever reason both of my hands at that point got messy from this stuff, what I would suggest at that point is doing one of two things. Let's say that the more you can keep clean, the better. So if I have like 3 fingers that are gross now because they got covered in chicken juice, these 2 are now going to be my best friends. So by that, what I mean is I've got my 3 fingers away from the wheel and my 2 remaining are on the wheel. Now that is a lot harder, but again, still very much doable. I still have my 2 fingers off and they're still grabbing the wheel so that I can propel. Again, not nearly as effectively as I would otherwise, but my point is that I can still move. Now, let's say that all of my hand is gross. At that point, you're looking at your elbow. So at that point, you got your hand extended out there, and you use your elbow as your primary means of propelling back and forth. You're just digging your elbow into that wheel to make it go back and forth. So real quick, I wanted to bring this up. I've got it about halfway out. This is the grill and smoker setup. The offset smoker is just right over there. But this is ultimately what I will be using to cook that meat from earlier. Meat's still inside, but I'm gonna get this prepped now that I've got everything seasoned. The trick here is that it's got these 2 wheels in the back, right there, and the front over here does not have wheels. This is, from what I understand, a pretty common setup with grills. Sometimes you'll even get one that doesn't have any wheels at all. The trick here, and the reason that I got this, is so that I could treat it kind of like a cart. So the way that I move this, by putting my hand here, lifting it up, and then using this hand, which is currently holding my cell phone, to pull back. Now, obviously, I can't do that while I'm recording, but I did want to sort of demonstrate what exactly that looked like. So we've now been cooking on the grill for a little while, or the smoker for a little while. I've got the offset smoker going. We're currently looking at a temperature of about 225 and climbing. I just added some more wood. Now, here's the problem, and one that I probably should have mentioned earlier, but neglected to do so. I can pretty easily, and I'm gonna try to make this quick so that I don't lose too much heat here, but I can pretty easily get this up. The problem is I can't really get it down nearly as easily because when it's up, it'll be too high up for my hand to reach it without potentially going over, not necessarily open flames right now, but it's 230 or so degrees in that little tube. I don't want to put my hand in there. So what I'm gonna do instead is get some help, specifically with these guys right here. So when that goes up, I'm going to grab it in order to bring it back down and then catch it with my other hand. I'll try to take a video of it for you. There, just let her go like that. So like I said a bit ago, I was trying to get that done relatively quickly so that I didn't lose too much heat. I'm just waiting for it to get back up now. But while I've got a second, just a reminder, I've got some bumper stickers. I also have magnets. These two are the only ones that I thought were ones that I think people would want to put on the back of their own car. But we have plenty of options that are all available on the Facebook page. So if you are not following me there, follow me there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, give us a holler. One last thing I wanted to discuss before calling it a day. At this point, meat's all done. We tried a little bit of it right after it was ready and it turned out just fine. The grill doesn't show this quite as well because grills are less consistent in terms of height. So I instead want to turn your attention to, in this case, this is just our stove. And what I want to call attention to, again, is that height difference. I brought this up with the sink, but it's just as true with the stove, and again, bears a lot of attention because with the sink, all that we're dealing with is sort of like, or like the countertop, all you're dealing with is cutting vegetables where your knife is up here. Well, the same is true for the stove, meaning that in this case, you're not cutting vegetables, which is still dangerous. You are at that point dealing with hot stuff, potentially hot liquids, which again is very risky. So the way that I have historically counteracted this is by sitting in a stool. There are a lot of bar stools out there, namely that I'd put them at like 3-ish feet off the ground. So they're a bit taller than regular chairs. This is actually that bar stool in question. Right now we have it in the living room because it's more effective right now. Generally, as a side table, so like if I'm sitting on that chair there and I'm on my computer, this gives me a nice spot to put my mouse, maybe a drink. But when I'm getting onto this, a couple things, and I'll show you over on this side table here because it's the easiest method to do so. So step one is putting a hand here, and then step two is putting in your other hand on some sort of secondary surface as a sort of counterbalance. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your hand here with your other hand on the stool. You're going to lift with both hands and then sort of shove from here over to the stool. So again, what this does is essentially raises your body so that it's a bit taller so that you can better access the stove. Now, again, a couple of things in terms of balancing and safety there. First of all, again, it's taller than a regular chair, so it's harder by default to get into. But what makes it more difficult, I would say, and potentially more risky, is that because it's just a small circular platform, that also gives you less room to work with in terms of maneuvering to get into that seat. Again, going back to my video on pushing yourself, but pushing yourself reasonably, that may not be reasonable. um, Case in point, this is very stupid of me, but at the time, it made sense. I once lived at a house in downtown Indianapolis, and our dryer, our clothes dryer, um, was on a platform. It was essentially one of those situations where you had the washing machine and then you had the dryer on top. Um, and what made this particularly difficult was that the buttons for that dryer were on top of the dryer. So you had the wash, the dryer, and then on top of that, the dryer buttons. So even if I got my clothes in, it still wasn't exactly the easiest to get the dryer going. So that took quite a bit of finagling. And early on, what I would do is, rather than use a secondary platform, I would use a crutch and sort of lift myself that way, for basically free arming it onto that seat. That is very risky. Do not do that. As someone who almost fell repeatedly doing stupid stuff like that, don't do that. But that's how we learn. So in any case, like I said earlier, just make sure that you're dealing with stuff that you can deal with. Another way to counteract both of these points, first of all, you could get something a little lower. Something else I've done historically is put my knees on a chair, like just a regular dining room chair. That still gets you a fair bit of height. It gives you more of a platform to work with because it's a bigger chair. And you also have a back. So that's the other thing. If you're on that bar stool, and especially if your core isn't in the best of shapes, then at that point having that back to that chair is almost mandatory. If you don't need something even more effective than that, which is again perfectly fine. Do what you need to do. And in a pinch, I should also say these are ways to try to make cooking easier and somewhat safer. But if you're adding 20 times the risk by trying to get hired to make life a little easier, don't do it. Just don't do it. Again, push yourself, but push yourself to your limits, not past them. Okay, so at this point, that is pretty much all I have as far as cooking, grilling, and smoking. So at this point, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, send me a message. If there's anything we can do for you as far as making sure that your wheelchair or other mobility equipment is properly repaired and in good shape, just give us a holler. My phone number is 317-349-2105, excuse me. We're here for you. Keep rolling, everybody.